Linda and Howard, I think I will begin, if that's okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Gerhardt, a board member of the Art Alliance of Contemporary Glass. And on behalf of my friends and colleagues on the board, we would like to welcome you to today's October 4th AACG Fired Up program. AACG is a leading international resource for glass collectors, artists, gallerists, museum personnel, educators, and others on all matters related to glass art. It also provides a place for the glass community to have robust conversations about the field, as well as for us to allow for our educational mission, which, among other things, is to provide exhibition grants and artistic scholarships. If you like today's program, we would like to see more. We hold Zoom programs every Friday of the month, the rest of the month, and those are exclusively for AACG members. Howard Cohen has put in the chat a link for you to pursue if you want further information about joining AACG. One of the important benefits is that we have a private video library, an extensive video library on our website for members, literally with hundreds of videos on glass art that you can access anytime. In addition, we organize special trips exclusively for AACG members, and our next one is going to Prague, Basel, and Amsterdam, and it's a small trip limited to 20 people. So for more information, please go to one of our websites, aacgglass.org, aacgglass.org. Now it's my distinct honor to introduce and give a warm welcome to our guest this afternoon, to renowned artist Narcissus Quagliata, who will talk about his work, multi-decades of work, as well as a special upcoming exhibition entitled Archetypes and Visions of Light and Glass, which will shortly open at the Forest Lawn Museum in Glendale, California. In fact, it will open on October 23rd, later this month. This is the first retrospective exhibition devoted to an artist who is among the most influential figures in glass art for over the past 50 years. And from technical advances in glass fusing to radical stylistic innovations, Narcissus has redefined what it means to be a glass artist. He has been instrumental in moving stained glass beyond ecclesiastical and domestic settings and into realms of public art and avant-garde studio practices for contemporary fine art. Among his many life achievements has been the development of a number of techniques to create fused glass imagery, a process akin to painting. We will hold questions, or if you have questions, please put them in the chat, but we will hold questions during his presentation. And then we will allow at least the last 15 minutes or so for the Q&A portion of the program. Importantly, today's program is sponsored by Bullseye Glass Company. Thank you, Bullseye. And I know Lonnie is on this program. Thank you, Lonnie. And please extend our best wishes. And thank you to Dan as well. For the past half century, Bullseye Glass Company has been collaborating with artists like Narcissus to support the world's glass community through technical innovation, shared expertise, and the development of unparalleled palette of compatible colored glass. Bullseye welcomes all glass-curious people to visit their resource centers in New York, Santa Fe, Los Angeles, the Bay Area, and of course, Portland. This fired up presentation will be recorded, as you may have noted, and placed on our YouTube channel for you to watch again and hopefully even share with others. Now, I'll turn the program over to Narcissus, who will share his screen and give you a presentation. And again, please post your questions into the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end of the program. Narcissus, please be sure to unmute yourself, and welcome.
Thank you. I never get used to doing this. I have to be honest. And I have technical assistance next to me in case I need it. But thank you to the Alliance for Contemporary Glass to invite me to do this presentation. And thank you for Bullseye to sponsor this. I was just in Portland 10 days ago, finishing a piece. So let me start. And I will start by talking for 10 minutes so that once I start showing imagery, it will flow and I don't have to stop and explaining a lot of the images, which would make the presentation cumbersome. So basically, I want to just give people a sense of my background, because my background has a lot to do with what I did with my artwork. I was born and raised in Rome, and when I was 20, I moved to California. That was to San Francisco. That was 62. So you can imagine that the cultural shift from a bourgeois family in Rome, Italy, in the 60s to California in the 60s, especially San Francisco, was a radical shift of lifestyle and viewpoint. By the way, since I didn't have any support because I severed ties with my family, I was on my own. So I literally experienced San Francisco from the bottom up. Now, I signed up for my dream was to be a painter. It is still my dream. I never changed viewpoint on that issue, but you must understand all my work from the viewpoint that I've always wanted to be a painter. And I am a watercolorist as well as I've gotten involved with glass. So I went through college. I got a master's degree in painting, studied with Richard Diebenkorn, Elmer Bischoff in all those years. I come out of college, and all of a sudden there is the arts and crafts movement, the studio glass movement blossoming. And I had stumbled into stained glass and noticed how beautiful the rich colors of glass were in a show in New York by Marc Chagall, actually between the time I was in Rome on my way to San Francisco. In those days, you took a boat and a bus to go from one place to the other. So in New York, I saw the magnificent stained glass of Marc Chagall, and it stayed with me. So I come out of college, and I, out of curiosity, want to expand my repertoire, and I touch glass. From the moment I touched glass, I was lucky. Why? Because I got commissions. I began to explore this material, and immediately there was a use for what I did. So between the years between the years of 70 and 93, all I did was develop my painting and develop stained glass. I was totally uninterested in traditional stained glass. As a matter of fact, I hated it. I wanted to have an outlook of a contemporary painter. So I did everything I could to make a stained glass window feel like the most natural thing there is to do. But in reality, stained glass is a construction which forces you down a path. Now, I love stained glass. I still do stained glass. But I have to say that I pushed the medium to the most extreme I could think of. Then I want to define a different block of time. Between 93 and 2024, I developed a new language for glass. So let me back up and say that in 93, I was invited at Bullseye to experiment with their new fusible glass. It was stunning because in my first awkward experiments, I really realized that something had been unleashed, something had been out of a prison, which is, I understood very clearly in my first and second visit in 93 that you could paint with the material. You did not have to do this awkward set of steps of cutting glass, finding it, cutting it, binding it in lead. All of this could be left behind. All you had to do is actually learn how to use the glass to paint. It did not turn out to be such an easy task to do. So I want to fast forward and say that I dedicated from 93 to 2 weeks ago to try to understand how to make this material be alive. And by being alive, I mean so that you could do any style with glass. So let's fast forward. And I want to say that yesterday, I taped the conclusion of a 3-year effort of downloading all my knowledge into video form so that everything I have learned about painting with glass will be and is and will be available to the general public. My goal was that if somebody in 30 years wants to know how to make a painting with glass, they could follow my videos one after the other. There is 250 or 300 demos, and all with a discussion on the material of glass. So in my opinion, the perfect painting today has to be done with glass. Why? Because glass is a contemporary material. Glass was developed in the last 150 years, from skyscrapers being covered with glass to fiber optics. Glass has invaded and determined our life. It holds light, and it is the new painting for me. So I wanted to share this, and I want to celebrate that yesterday I taped the conclusion of 3 years of arduous work to show how you can make a painting with glass. I also want to say that in 95, I moved to Mexico. And from 2015, I started coming back to the States, based in Los Angeles, where I am informally the Director of Innovation for Judson Studios. Now, I want to basically say how I arranged my creative life. And there was a certain wisdom in how I did it, which is I did a lot of architectural work. And that's how I engaged with society. It was challenging, difficult, interesting, but it was a dialogue between myself and the world around me. I felt that's how I supported myself most of my life. I managed to do that on 50% of my time. And that's the key to understanding my work. Why am I bothering to say how I make my money? Because for the last 50 years, I have paid my bills by working on 100 commissions. I think I did 100, 110, somewhere in there. Public, corporate, private, I probably did 80 or 90 residential projects. But I wanted to be very clear. I paid my bills with my architectural work. What was with 50% of my time? What did that mean to me? It meant that I had 50% of my life paid for, in which I could do anything I wanted. So that's where my fine art work comes in. And I have dedicated the key factor in that 50% that I said I dedicated to myself and my explorations is that I would do anything I wanted. I didn't have to sell what I did. I did sell a lot of it, but I didn't have to. And that is key. I did not want my fine art world in the last 50 years to me enmeshed in my survival. I wanted that activity to be pure, meaning this is what I want to explore. And I explored themes that are very luminous, and I have explored themes that are very dark, the way life is. And I didn't feel compelled to please anyone. I would be the tough person to please. So I was my first critic. I want to basically say that my work is divided, my fine art work then is divided between it's all figurative, and it's divided between a series called Archetypes, which is the strangeness of being alive. I'll put it that way. Mediterranean Treasures, I'm a Mediterranean person, and I always loved the fact that Greek art is found at the bottom of the sea. And I found it very bizarre that there is so much art in the sea, and that once in a while we dig out some of these wonderful pieces. Then I have two series which are called Prisoners, Prisoners and Homeless. The themes speak for themselves. I might explain a few things of why I'm interested in pursuing images in that respect. And the last thing that I want to do is say that all of what you're going to be seeing is not in chronological order. It's instead in thematic order. So you're going to first see the architectural work, and then you're going to see my artwork, and the artwork comes into watercolors, stained glass, and fused glass, and they will be mixed. You'll be seeing on the same theme something I did in the late 70s and something I did last year. So having said that, let me start from the architectural. Let's take a fly through a few of my projects in the architectural realm. Can you see? I assume you can see that we are in Taiwan, and this was perhaps the biggest project I ever did in my career. So
Just ask them if they're seeing this.
Just a moment, I need to be, what?
Ask if they are seeing this.
Uh, Are you seeing the image that I am showing? I'm
Yes, we are.
showing an architectural render. Okay, so let's start from my biggest project. It took 5 years from the signing of the contract to the inauguration. We are in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, the second biggest city in Taiwan. And I was asked to do a city center, a metro station in the city center. So so this was the render. This is the reality. The metro station has been built. The project that I have is in the concourse level of this 4 entryway metro station, which is in the center of the city. An image of Kaohsiung, an image of my concept of how to place something exactly in the heart of a city. So this is where my dome is placed, and the 2 lines of the metros cross right there. So you can see that the city center is right at the place where the lines of the metro system cross. So the Prime Minister explained to me what he expected of me. It was pretty intimidating, but I got it done anyhow. So just to give you a sense of the scale of the piece, the project is 7,200 square feet. It's made out of 1,152 panels. And I started, as I usually do, with everything else, with a watercolor. This watercolor, by the way, is going to be in the museum in Forest Lawn. So we go from the watercolor to the finished project. There it is. It worked. It was a difficult thing to do, but it worked. And I did something that was kind of against the spirit of the time. I did a very figurative piece. There is, I think, 90 figures in this project, and some of them are dreamed, and they deal with all kinds of themes. I used all kinds of glass. I used Venetian glass that I went to blow in Venice in the Amphora studio. I used blown glass from Germany in Lambert. I used bullseye glass. This is from Germany. And then I used bullseye glass, and all of it was elaborated into a very complex weave using just about every technique that you can think of. Here we're preparing to etch the face of a dancer, and here is kind of emerging after the acid etching process. I love this picture because it's very Michelangelo-esque. Here are 2 Germans holding the sun. And I always loved this picture. But there is every emotion I could depict: pain, war, grief, joy, nature, womanhood, the moon, birth. But this picture gives you a sense of the scale of the piece. When I look at it, I'm kind of blown away that I actually made it. But there it is, a phoenix coming out of conflict. On the bottom rim are all the human emotions. On the top are all the cosmic forces. Life coming out of space, space being inside a figure, That entire figure, which is 11 meters long, which means that it's 33 feet or 36 feet, is all made out of bullseye glass. It looks small, but in reality, it's a huge figure. It was inaugurated by the president of Taiwan. And let's shift to another totally different project. Being from Rome, you might imagine that I really enjoyed doing a project in Rome. So it's a long story. We're not going to get into it, but the building that you're looking at in this maquette is the Baths of Diocletian in the year 300. And it is in that building, the ruin of which you're looking at, that I did my project in Rome. It is a dome, and it is in the entry rotunda of the basilica. So those are the Roman bricks. And at the time of Michelangelo, the basilica was a ruin. In other words, it was 1,200 years old when Michelangelo was given the job to remake it into a monastery and make of this a basilica. So this is his drawing done with his assistant, Docio. And I just want to fly through the making of this. It was an incredible experience for me to work on a building of that historical significance. The bricks above me, I'm on a scaffolding measuring the space. The bricks above me were put there in the year 296. So you can imagine that putting a piece on those bricks did have an impact on my life. So let's keep on moving forward. And one of the things that I discovered is how to use light. The curved crystal bevels project an amazing light show of the spectrum. At a distance of 75 feet, those projections are quite extraordinary. Now, the piece is fitted with 3 lenses, which I did with Mr. Salvador Cuevas of the University of Mexico. Those particular, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going too fast. The central spheres I did at Pilchuck in 1999. And it was Billy Morris and a crew during the winter that blew the central spheres that are in the apex of the entryway of the cathedral. So here is our big effort to make 3 concentric spheres. In the crew is also my son, Bill Morris, next to me, my son, Orfeo, who has a wonderful studio in Mexico City now. And this was what we did at Pilchuck. The spheres were taken to Mexico and fitted into the framework. And then they were sent to Rome, where they were actually fitted into the cathedral. There was a big inauguration in Mexico with the chancellor of the university. American Airlines sponsored the movement of 23 crates. I convinced them because I told them that this was the only American-made thing that would ever rest on a Michelangelo building. And it was convincing. They actually bought it. And it was also true. It isn't that I cheated them. So this is the crates being loaded on American Airlines. And here is all of us doing that insane thing of putting this thing into place. My son Orfeo holding the spheres as they're being fixed. And And then let's go to the scientific instrumentation. And here we are, Professor Cuevas designed the concept and executed it. He fabricated lenses that will focus an image 75 feet away. These three lenses deviate the rays of the sun and project the sun fully focused. So the sun moves in the rotunda, but in the solstices and equinoxes at noon, the sun is in the perfect center of the rotunda. So it was a feat. Here we are putting the instruments into place, and you can kind of see the complexity of what we did, but to fully appreciate what we did, when the moon is in front of the sun, like it is now in this picture, this is what you see in the basilica floor. In other words, it projects a focused image of the eclipse. Now, the real one that was shocking was the precision with which it recorded Venus. When Venus is in front of the sun in this format and crossing the face of the sun, this is what you see on the basilica floor. It was a cloudy day. It was scary. I thought that we wouldn't get to photograph the passage of Venus, but we were lucky. But that is Venus. Take a look. You can see it with the naked eye, right on the basilica floor. You see the tripod, you see the marble floor, and here is all of the pictures that we took documenting that passage. It was a cool thing to do in Rome, my own city. That's Via Nazionale. At the end of it, there is the Victor Emmanuel Monument. So that was a way that I could re-experience Rome in my late 50s. Now I'm going to give you just a sampling of other big jobs I did in corporate lobbies. Here is a lobby in Oakland. Part of this will be in the show at the Forest Lawn. It's a long story, but it's there. This is a lobby in Mexico City on one of the main avenues. It's all done. This was completely fused glass, no leaded glass here. A project in Taiwan, the Oriental Empire Building. Here it is. That one was done in Germany with a combination of enamel glass and bullseye fused glass. Here is the inauguration with the Italian ambassador, et cetera, et cetera. But you get a sense of the scale and you get a sense of the place. This is my first fully fused, huge project done at Judson Studio for a private residence in Newport Beach. Here it is. It's an Iranian, it's a mansion by an Iranian gentleman. And you can kind of see the detailing. And that brings us to the end of the sort of major works. I did not put any private residences, otherwise we would go way over time. So let's go on to my artwork. The titles sometimes are telling. This is my androgynous shadow, a stained glass window I did in 1976, which I consider the beginning of my career as a fine artist in glass. It's a self-portrait. This one is stained glass suicide. This is my studio in 1976 in South of Market, San Francisco. You can see the windows are not in the best of shape. But I was a very happy man. I was very young, and I was doing something that I believed in. And all of a sudden, I found the thread of my truer self. And I began to work from there. Soon after, I did a portrait of my meditation teacher, a symbolic portrait of my meditation teacher. I did a watercolor, which you can see now, and this got turned into a stained glass window, which eventually ended up in the Metropolitan Museum. Now that I'm an 82-year-old man, I look back and I'm staggered at the fact that I got a piece at the age of 38 into the Met. At that time, it was just the next thing. But now that I look back, I say, oh my God, you know, it was recently on the same theme of Suzuki Roshi, I did this piece with fused glass called The Premonition. And it is going to be in the show at the Forest Lawn Museum. Now let's move on. I did learn in Germany how to enamel very well. So I did this piece on industrial enamel, and it's one of my favorite pieces. It's called The Melancholy of the Mutant. It's a ubiquitous scene. It's a ubiquitous image, obviously androgynous. I don't know why I love it so much, but so did a client in Mexico who bought it, and he shows it with great pride. So let's keep on going with the archetype theme, the strangeness of life, mutants. Here are two large watercolors of mutants, and it's a dialogue between the strangeness of our biology, a sense of the emptiness of space, a comment on time, a comment on how grotesque life is, but how passionately interesting it is. Some of these have been more classical in their concept. Here is a man, and here is night. Here is a woman and space and the cosmos. And just to get a sense of how these pieces feel outside of my studio, here they are in a gallery setting. All of these have sold. I still retain this one, which is one of my favorite, The Time of Space, or The Space of Time, and again in the gallery. I have also done pieces that in the early part of the time when I was exploring fusing, these are from the 90s. This piece is in the collection of the De Young Museum. This is in a private collection. These two pieces were done in David Ruth's studio. And here are other pieces from this series. I have several. Not many, but I have several that are still part of my collection. A mutant, a figure of light. And that theme of the Madonna, I did do for the Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. This piece was executed at Bullseye in 2002. And it was quite an effort to do this piece. I had not developed all the technique that now I to me, this piece looks primitive. I did it with the little I knew at that time. Now I would do a piece like this very differently. So this was an image from those early times when all of a sudden the sheet of glass became like a sheet of watercolor paper, very different temperatures, but that's how I experience it. I experience it as a painting. Gateway Tonight was my first large piece in fusing, 1995. Again, if I had to do this today, I would do it very differently. But even with the little I knew about fused glass, you can see that there is nothing left of the tradition of stained glass here. This is more like abstract painting from the 50s, 60s. It's a figure with the immensity of space. This one was realized at Bullseye 2, and it now rests on a water in a hotel nearby where I live, Del Santuario. Okay, let's go into another series, which is the Mediterranean Treasures. I always loved the fact that Greek art can be found in the sea, but it can be found partially consumed. Barnacles grow onto these figures. So art is made, it goes into the sea, it gets covered by nature, and then when it's lucky, we find it and we clean it up. So there, we are left with some remnants. And I find this to be an incredible commentary on beauty and time. So here is my first piece for the series. It's in the collection of the Smithsonian Institute. And it's a torso with marine life. It's in stained glass, and the torso with marine life growing out of it. Another famous Greek statue imagined in the sea. Another one yet. This is a piece that I sold and I have no clue. It's in the Los Angeles area, but I have no clue what happened to this piece. But it shows that at that time, I wanted to include the hot glass into the making of my stained glass. So here you have a piece that is a transition piece between stained glass and fused glass. Again, let's go back to watercolors. I love the medium, and I do everything that I do it in watercolor and in glass. Here is a sense of some of the watercolors in my studio. You get a feeling for the imagery. And I had a big show, a big retrospective show in Mexico City, which did change my life in '95. And let's keep on going. This is a piece that is in the Forest Lawn show. It's a stained glass piece with fused glass intrusions. And this one too is a stained glass piece with some fused glass. And this one too is in the Forest Lawn show. I'm now going to show you a sequence of pieces that were my education on how to mix enamel painting with fusing. And these were critical for me because I think I made a circle on how to use fused glass when I began to incorporate enamel painting with the fused glass. The tears of time, spring, and you get a sense of the size of these pieces. Most of these pieces are mine, and I want to actually make a strange comment. My stained glass, most of the important pieces of my stained glass has been collected and it's in museum. I don't have one piece of my fused glass, which is, I think, my claim to fame, into a museum. So it's a strange thing in my life, and I still have a pretty extensive collection of the whole process that went from the invention of the fusing as a language for painting all the way to current work, which you'll see at the end of this. So here is a sense. Here are two pieces that are going to be in the show at the Forest Lawn. And you get a sense of them once they are outside of the studio. Then we go to the prisoners and the homeless. So I've worked with the themes of prisoners from the day a friend of mine went to prison for 3 years. I had to visit him and I had to listen to all his stories. So I had to get rid of all his stories. I began to work with the material that he was giving me. This piece is in my studio. It's a pyramid and it's called The Death of a Prisoner. And it is 4 images of a prisoner in a claustrophobic space: solitude, compression, pain, and death. Here is the solitude one. Here is the death one. And this one is leaded. You can kind of see that there is etching into the moth, which is the only living thing in this piece. So here we are. You can get a sense of my charcoal drawings on the theme. And I want to show you my prisoners that I just installed. I had a commission for the School of Law in Mexico City to do 6 prisoners. I've done 3. I still have to do 3 and deliver them by March. They are in a very ancient courtyard. And this commission was given me by the client, who is the head of the board of trustees of the school. He loves my prisoner series. And so he commissioned me to do prisoners for this site. These are very recent works. I installed these in May. And you can get a sense of what they feel like. And here, the inauguration, which also the graduation day for the graduate school. You can see on my right is the gentleman who donated the works. On my left is the president of the faculty, which is, by the way, 15,000 students. And here you get the sense of this ancient building, which was built. It's downtown. It's a block from the famous pyramid next to the cathedral, and the building was built in the 1600s. This after the big opening, we hung out and we just had a party with friends. But you get a sense, the building was built in the 1609. So for me, it's an achievement. It's a real achievement to feel that I have placed something permanently in a historical building downtown Mexico City. Now we go to the homeless, and I'll only say that up to when I came to Mexico, I was surrounded by homeless because all my studios were always in the bad part of town. And I began to get close to some of them. And so this was my first piece, a watercolor that I did in 82 or 83, 82 actually. I was 40 years old. And out of that, out of that, you can get a sense of scale from this. I did this piece that I consider my best stained glass piece I ever made. It's called Porca Miseria, which is damn misery in Italian. And it is, let me see if I can change the location of this. And it is a leaded work. And it is going to be in the exhibition at the Forest Lawn. It is part of the collection of the Oakland Museum. And it is because of this that the Oakland Museum lent this, that I asked the Forest Lawn Museum to please keep keep on view their 13th century French stained glass and their Dürer stained glass from Germany from the 1500s. And I wanted them to be in the same room with this piece, which, by the way, has metal accrusions on it. And then the last thing I'm going to show you is this last series that I am trying to make on the theme of the homeless. So this is an ancient watercolor that I did in 1982. And I turned that into a fused glass piece last year. And you can sort of see that I didn't copy it, but I kept the spirit of it. Again, I did big advances because I started sculpting the surface to do this. And also it has transmitted light, reflective light. I began to work in a much more complex way. So finally, we come to the project that I just realized at Bullseye Glass. And it was an extraordinary experience for me, very difficult, but this is the map. This is called the bench. So essentially, the series is Gotta Smoke, which is the one you saw. This one is the bench. Then I still have to do a panel called the cart and a panel called the blanket. It's pretty clear that the whole series has an overall theme of a life condition being explored. So let's go to the actual piece. Here, I have not seen the finished original. I left after it was put into the kiln, but fortunately, I was given high resolution photography, and I want to say that I'm very pleased of how this came. Here is the bench. It's 11 feet across, 3 panels, 5 feet high. I just want to take a moment. Given that it's the last creative act I've done, I am very attached to how it turned out to be. And I'm giving you a little bit of a tour, a close-up tour of this piece. Oops. But I also want to show you what it looks like without the light from behind. So this piece too is a tour de force on making something work with the light from behind and with the light from the front. It is a low relief from the front, and you can kind of see what this feels like. So we're almost to the end here. Bear with me. So I want to just throw in a few pictures taken by my daughter. We documented this both in video and photography. So you get a sense of what the piece feels like before it goes into the kiln. So here is the wonderful crew in the Bullseye studio loading the kiln. And here is me working on all these pieces late at night. I worked 12 to 14 hours a day for 16 weeks. to get this done. So here is a sense of what it feels like. So you can see that we're miles away from stained glass. This is a painting with glass. So here we go. And you just to get a sense of the intricacy of the surface before it's fused. And I'm just going to end with my yet to be done pieces, which is the cart, which is going to be bright oranges and reds and dark grays, suffocating grays. And then the blanket, which is an image of cold. And you can kind of see where the series Gotta Smoke, the bench, the cart, and the blanket are a statement. I'll let everybody decide what the statement is about, but it is a statement. And this is the announcement for my show. If you're in the area, please come. And I wanted to thank our sponsors today for sponsoring this lecture. And on that note, I will take questions.
Narcissus, thank you. That is awe-inspiring and remarkable personally for me is just the scale. That is very, very remarkable. My thanks again to Bullseye Glass, and Lonnie and Dan for your support in particular of this program and your support of the glass community. We have a bunch of questions that are now appearing in the chat. And I don't know if it would be easier for me to state them out loud or if Rodrigo could maybe help or assist in identifying some of those questions. But to get us started, there was a question in particular. Oh, what I wanted to remind people is that, because this question did come up in the chat, the Forest Lawn Museum is in Glendale, California, and Glendale is in the Los Angeles area. The exhibition runs from the 23rd of October of this year all the way to March 9th of next year, 2025. In fact, I will be there in the first week of November, so I will make a point of going and seeing the exhibition itself. But the first question I think I see in the chat is, Narcissus, could you talk a little bit about how you paint with enamels on fused glass, please?
With brushes.
I thought you were going to say very carefully, but with brushes works too.
Actually, very uncarefully. In truth, in Judson's studio, there is some master painters. Indre Bileris is in the studio at Judson, and she paints these magnificent figures for their traditional work. And I'm completely intimidated. I am a Stone Age presence. I take the material and brutally put it on the glass in the most disrespectful way as possible. And so I have to say that I don't know what to say. I mix the paint in the most simple way, and then I use my heart or I use my anger to put it on the glass. It's one of the two. It depends on the day.
That's great. Thank
I don't
you.
have any I'm the last person that you should ask
Oh.
a technical question about enamel on glass. Whenever I need something very sophisticated done, I go to the people that really know how to do it. in Judson. They have magnificent painters. In Germany, they did too. And I am a crude novice in that respect. But I did do some very interesting things. I want to point out that in the piece called Gotta Smoke, I caked on to the shock of Indre Bileris, who is a fine painter. I put on that piece so much paint that the enamel was this thick, and it baked and cracked. And the idea was that the enamel be mud, because ultimately enamel is mud. And so I brought it back to its original Stone Age use, but it can be used in a very sophisticated way.
Thank you. Another question, or a couple of questions have come up in particular about some of your figures. Talk a little bit about how they're lit when they're in situ. I think people are curious because it appears that there may be a challenge to seeing the image or the details of the image. So if you could talk a little bit about some of
Yes.
how some of these pieces are lit.
Okay, so for most of my life, I just worked with transparent paint, with transparent glass. So lighting in a gallery setting, a piece meant that you had to make a frame, and then you had to light a white wall behind it. So the logic of most of the work I've done is the logic of a stained glass window, because I've worked primarily with transparent glass. But in the last years, I started using opaque glass. And what I ask of myself, and I want to talk about the bench now, is that I produce artwork that looks good with and without lighting from behind. So as you saw, the bench, you can see the bench without light from behind, or you can see it with light going through it. It is difficult because it implies, and actually the chapter on opacity and transparency is the last chapter I did in 3 years' work, and it was by far the hardest to do, to explain in my series of classes. It was to explain the relationship between opacity and transparency is to also understand how the light works. So essentially, I like my work to be lit from behind, but I also want some light to fall from the front. The bench is going to be shown, and I'm sure we're going to have a hell of a time figuring out how to light it in the museum display.
Another question, and I think you alluded to this about your piece from Oakland, that was that the piece you were able to salvage and save, or was that another piece? Would you talk a little bit about that?
Actually, the show exists because of a very peculiar story, which I will say in just a few seconds. I was in Mexico in my home in the country, and I got a phone call from a lady who says, "Oh, Mr. Quagliata, I'm so glad I reached you." And he says, "What can I do for you? And who are you?" She says, "Oh, I'm so-and-so from Cushman and some company in California." And he says, "We own your piece that you did for the Pacific Bell Building in 1982. I said, "Oh, what can I do for you? Did it break or something?" She says, "Do you want it back?" And I said, "You've got to be kidding me. The piece is 60 foot long by 12 foot wide, high." And she said, "We sold the building, and the new owner wants to do a totally different lobby, and we don't know what to do with the piece. So I asked James at the museum, who I got to know at Forest Lawn, if he was interested in just getting the piece for the price of uninstalling it and shipping it. And they said yes, they were interested. So the piece got to the Forest Lawn in, I don't know, 30 panels. They loved the panels. They started unpacking the panels, and then they said, we must show some of these panels. And then they decided to show some of these panels. And then they came to me and said, well, if you're going to show some of these panels, why don't you do a show? And that's how it got to happen that I did the show at the Forest Lawn Museum.
Fascinating. A couple more questions have come up, and we're going to run a little bit over because we do
I don't
have some
care. I mean,
questions.
I've done the difficult part, so answering the questions to people's heart's content is not a problem.
You're very kind, and we appreciate your graciousness. So we'll run just a little bit over the allotted hour because we do have some more questions. A couple of people have asked at this point, what do you see as next in your work, in your career? What are you thinking about, or what would you like to do?
That is a good question, because most of your life, you're kind of worried about what people think about you. You know, you're a young man, you're ambitious, you're trying to make it. You have a very different mindset. At my age, the only thing you want to do is really what you want to do. And I have 2 or 3 things that I really want to achieve in my life. And one is I developed this language on the foundation of Bullseye's science. So they solved these problems of how all these glasses can live with each other. And I developed a language, a very complex and sophisticated language on how you can paint with this. I have a heart of a painter. And I believe that a painting with glass today is infinitely more beautiful than a painting on a canvas. And my mission is, having created a way to manifest that, give people the tools to do it, and make other painters discover this amazing material, because you can do any style you want. I want to give an example. If you want to stand, you can do anything. You don't have to do what a stained glass artist does. You can stand 6 feet from a kiln, and you can throw glass into the kiln the way Jackson Pollock would. Okay, and then you can just clean up the edges so that it doesn't burn and then you can fire that. You can pour the glass into the shells. You can do anything. So supplying the world with a language and a know-how of how to use glass for fine art purposes is one of the things I want to achieve. And I'm part way there. For me, I want to get more and more outrageous as time goes by. At 82, my friends are dying. You have no idea how long you'll last. And the attitude is to be reckless, absolutely reckless. Fortunately, I have a level of discipline in how I do things. So if my content is reckless, I have learned enough discipline on how to get things done, and I hope to achieve my best. You know, I actually hope that my best work is still in front of me. You saw all these images and all these things, but in reality, the last piece I showed you, the bench, might be one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And one last PS, one of the problems of growing older, if you've been successful, is that you begin to wonder if you're as good as when you were 50, 60, or 70. So to do something at the top of your game and push it at every level, at the content level, at the material level, at the technique level, at the spiritual level, is kind of what I want to do.
Thank you. Sharing with us that creative spirit still burns within you is it's ever as vital today as it's been through the course of your career. It's very heartening. It's very exciting.
Can I add something?
Please.
One of the things that surprised me, I managed to finance all of these courses that I videoed through the fact that my students signed up. So, you know, when I was teaching course 1, I was producing course 2. When I was teaching course 2, I was producing course 3. It's a very expensive proposition to do these courses in terms of the production. And I was very relieved when I knew that I would actually get to the end of the line and finish the whole cycle. But one of the things that surprised me is how good my students have been. They have taken this language and they are doing something with it. So I am sort of daydreaming of becoming a little bit of a curator for their work and putting together some exhibit, some book, something that shows that this journey we've done is actually a live thing. It isn't just me passing on something, because they've contributed a lot to me. And so this is something that has engaged me a lot and given me a lot of joy.
You are, again, in the chat, there are a number of compliments and that you're getting, and I hope you're able to see those. People are deeply appreciative of your thoughtfulness and your remarkable creativity. There's a little bit of a deep dive question talking about at what stage do you enamel? I think you've touched a little bit on that. And do you enamel before you layer the fruit and stringers? And probably a bit of a technical question, but I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit, because people are curious about your technique.
Did not. Well, hold on for a minute, just a minute. Okay, well, let's go in the back. Repeat the question, because I didn't fully grasp it, and I don't want to give you the wrong answer.
No, it's probably a bit technical. At what stage do you do your enamel, and at what point do you lay down the fruit and stringers? Sort of with the sequence.
Okay, the sequence is usually, I mean, it doesn't have to be that way, but usually I lay down a very light enamel to guide me. That initial lay of enamel on the glass probably disappears because it's so light, but I have a drawing on the glass that guides me. The glass then does the heavy lift. I transform the glass. The key to painting with glass is transforming it to begin with, not putting the material as you buy it off the shelf, but transforming it. It's like a painter making all the brush strokes before they make the painting. It's sort of a peculiar thing, but you transform the glass in myriad of ways, and then you begin to assemble it, and the heat binds it all. So I lay out the enamel to begin with to give me a guide. Then I put all the glass. And then at the end, if I need some touch-ups, I put them at the very end. But sometimes I pour a bucket of enamel on the piece, if that is what the content of the material requires. So it depends on the image, the protocol that you're going to follow. Doing painting with glass is like reverse engineering an image. You have an image, you have an idea, and then you have to imagine how to get to that through the various stages. Okay?
Got
What
it.
else?
Thank you. Thank you. Linda, I may ask you to go ahead and stop the recording. We'll still probably stay online for just a few more minutes because I think there are a couple more questions.
Sure.
Once again, I want to thank Narcissus. I want to thank you for your time and for sharing with us a lot of very personal thoughts about your creative process and how you work. I want to remind people that the exhibition is on view from the 23rd of October to March of 2025 at Forest Lawn Museum in Glendale, which is in the Los Angeles area. And again, I want to thank Bullseye Glass for their support of this particular program and their support, of course, of the glass community. With that note, we'll probably go ahead and stop the formal recording, but I think there are some people still online that may wish to unmute themselves and ask a question.